Welcome to Canadian Innovators, the show that celebrates innovation, entrepreneurs, and the Canadian spirit. I'm Jocelyn Bamford, and every week we introduce a new entrepreneur or expert in the economy to tell their stories and unpack the challenges of keeping jobs in Canada, as well as share ideas for economic growth and prosperity. Today on the program, we are going to discuss U.S. Canadian trade negotiations. Joining us to discuss and back for a return visit is Tim Egan, president of the High Park Group. Tim has over 25 years of experience in the energy and resource sector, working both nationally and internationally. Welcome back to the program, Tim.
Thanks for having me back, Jocelyn.
Well, thanks for joining us. Tim, for those who missed your last appearance, tell us about the High Park Group and what you do.
The High Park Group is a public affairs consultancy. We have a range of corporate and not-for-profit clients, Jocelyn, and our focus is on ensuring that there are the best conditions possible for those companies and not-for-profits to advance their interests and their causes. So we work hard with them to affect a change in narrative that will improve conditions for them. We want Canadian business to succeed, and we want the Canadian market to be a more open and competitive one.
Yeah, great stuff. I know that small to medium-sized business has not had a voice, so your group is front and center of making sure that voice is heard. So, Tim, it's been over a year with Mark Carney at the helm of this country, and Mr. Carney pitched to the Canadian people he was the man to get us a trade deal done. Now it's been over a year and a half, and we don't seem to be any closer to a deal than when we started. Tim, what is your view on the trade negotiations, and is Carney the man to deliver it to us?
Well, I think in the first instance, as you noted, the Prime Minister positioned himself as a business leader who is capable of getting things done. And he's obviously a dramatic improvement in that regard over the previous Prime Minister, who had, I think, neither the experience nor, frankly, the interest in closing on a deal. I do think Mr. Carney has an understanding of the importance of the Canada-U.S. relationship. But to your point, he promised a deal within a year. We don't have one yet. And I'm not hearing that we're particularly close to having one. While Canadian leaders are saying that they're working at this and they continue to engage directly, my American sources tell me that the Canadians are not coming to the table in the way that one would expect to in a relationship of this kind, in a trade deal that is this important. And so while I think the Prime Minister is espousing some rhetoric that suggests that he's in charge and trying to get things done, I'm not seeing this moving forward in a particularly quick way. And I think this is really, really concerning, because it does appear that the Mexicans are taking the trade relationship with the United States very seriously and working hard to advance their deal. And, in an ideal world, we would be working together. It is CUSMA, after all. It is a Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement. We would want all three parties at the table working hard to get something done fast.
Absolutely. Largest customer, we can't afford not to get a deal done. Tim, after months of the Prime Minister visiting other countries to work on trade deals with little progress, the deal with the United States, in a speech to New York businesses, the Prime Minister said that a strong Canada will make the U.S. great again. Let's take a listen and get your take.
They run through our energy partnership, where, at a time of a global energy crisis, Canada provides the United States with reliable power, with critical minerals that help fuel American growth. 99% of U.S. natural gas imports, 85% of electricity imports, 60% of crude oil imports. That is mutual strength. Let's be absolutely clear. Canada Strong will help make America great again.
So, Tim, how do you interpret this? Is there a thaw in the relations? Because we saw a different Mark Carney just a few months ago.
Well, we did. And as you recall, during an election campaign, he was suggesting that this American hegemon was at the border prepared to steal our resources from us, and that he was going to safeguard us against them. And now he's actually using that oft despised or oft criticized phrase, "Make America Great Again,"
So
and
Tim, I'm
he's
gonna
saying that.
hold you there. We're gonna go to break. We'll more when you come back on Canadian Innovators. Welcome back. I'm Jocelyn Bamford. My guest today is Timothy Egan, president of the High Park Group. Tim, before we went to break, we were listening to Mark Carney talk to a group of U.S. business folks in New York, and we had to go to break. So please continue your thought on if we're seeing a thaw in the relationship between U.S. and Canada.
Well, Jocelyn, what's particularly noteworthy about the Prime Minister's remarks is that he actually uses the president's famous phrase, "Make America Great Again." A few months ago, I think he wouldn't have done that. I think he wrote to power on the back of a lot of Canadian frustration and animosity towards the United States. And now he's using the language of the American government in an effort to draw us closer, perhaps to advance a trade deal. As we said earlier, though, I'm not convinced that he wants to close on a deal right now, and that I find that very alarming. But I think it's the case because I suspect that the governments of the Canadian government is of the view that after the midterms, they will have a more malleable American administration to deal with, because I suspect that they think that the Republicans won't do as well in the midterms. I think that's a dangerous strategy. I think what we should be doing is working 24/7 to close a deal now, because at the end of the day, the United States is an extraordinarily strong economic power in its own right. And in the absence of Canadian business engagement, what they will do is they will create business opportunities within the United States. And so the substitute for Canadian trade will, I think, be more internal US trade. And that's a missed opportunity for us. So as much as the Prime Minister is making some putting out some good messages and using the president's language to suggest an openness, I don't feel that he's moving at the speed we need to move to close on a deal.
So, Tim, on that same vein, let's watch a recent exchange in the House of Commons between MP Scott Aitchison and the Minister of Trade, Maninder Sindhu.
Mr. Speaker, under this Prime Minister, tariffs on steel have doubled, tariffs on lumber have tripled, and barriers on Canadian manufacturers have only expanded. Yet he has not secured the removal of a single one of those tariffs. While he says those tariffs are part of the reason Canada's economy is struggling, yet Mexico is getting close to a deal with the U.S. 2.6 million Canadians depend on trade with the United States for their livelihoods. So why is this Prime Minister dragging this out instead of fighting for tariff-free trade, and when will he deliver the results that he promised Canadian workers?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, as we approach the CUSMA review, we need to focus on trade diversification. Our efforts are working. They're leading to real results. Last year, 17% increase in non-U.S. exports. Fact number two, 170 million metric tons from the Port of Vancouver, a historic record. That's more shipments to China, Japan, and South Korea. And just in from the Port of St. John's, cargoes up by 30% at that port alone. Our efforts to open up new partnerships around the world are working. That includes Indonesia, Ecuador, UAE, with the European Union, and of course others with India, ASEAN, Mercosur, Philippines, Thailand, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. We are at the door. We're creating opportunities for Canadian workers. Thank you.
Tim, two completely different opinions. Who's right?
Well, you can't really compare them. They're apples and oranges, because Mr. Aitchison asked a question about the Canada-U.S. trade deal, and the minister responded by talking about diversification of trade beyond the U.S. And so he didn't answer the member's question. The member's question stands, which is, are we any closer to a deal with the United States? And I think the answer to that is no, we're not. And to the minister's points that, yes, the government is aggressively pursuing diversification of trade. This is not a new thing. The Conservative government under Mr. Harper pursued dozens of trade deals and successfully concluded dozens of trade deals. Nobody's averse to opening new economic opportunities for Canada around the world. But the reality of trade is first and foremost geography, Jocelyn. The best trading relationship is that you can have with the trading partner that is close to you. It reduces costs. There are all sorts of other connections that are in place, and you want to build on that as much as you can. And so what we should be running at as fast as we can is a closer deal with the United States. And again, credit to the government for continuing on the trend that Mr. Harper started with diversification, but the fundamental relationship of importance to our economy in a trading world is the relationship with the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can diversify all you want, but our largest and biggest customer and our most profitable, let's not forget that, is right next door. So we're going to take a break. More with Tim Egan from the Hyde Park Group discussing trade with the United States when we continue on Canadian Innovators. Don't go away. Welcome back. I'm speaking with Tim Egan from the Hyde Park Group, and we're discussing the U.S. Canadian trade agreement. Tim, Canadians involved with the trade negotiations are saying that the United States are not talking to them, and those on the U.S. side say the exact opposite. What are you hearing, and what more could we do to get an agreement with our largest customer?
Well, Jocelyn, I think in any trade arrangement, the parties will do a certain amount of posturing, and we're seeing a certain amount of posturing now. But for those of us who are really interested in seeing a deal done, business owners and their advisors, because we know that that's what's going to drive economic activity. I think what we have to do is step back and say, all right, what more can we do to press our elected officials to get to the table and to get this done? And I think there are a number of things that could be done. I think business leaders should be stepping up and stating explicitly and more aggressively that they want a trade deal done, that the well-being of our economy turns on it, that it's in our mutual interests, that whatever political disputes there might be at any time between our governments, it is the strongest relationship in the world, the relationship between Canada and the United States. I would argue the strongest trading relationship in the world. It's fundamental to the West, as in the broader West, as in free and open democratic societies that are committed to a more prosperous world. And we should be pursuing that to the best of our ability 24/7. I think the business leaders could step up more and call on officials to act on that agenda. I think we should also be looking at pursuing state governors and provincial premiers and saying, look, there are disputes between the federal governments that we both have. Ultimately, the deal is between those governments, but states and provinces can bring pressure to bear, on their federal counterparts to get a deal done. Because the trading relationship is very deep between the states and the provinces, and the opportunity to make it deeper is an enormous one that we should be pursuing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We need a deal. It impacts small to medium-sized business in ways that are immeasurable, and we need to have our voices heard. So I agree with you. Let's pivot now and talk about Alberta. The last time that you came to visit us, we talked about the MOU between Alberta and the federal government. It's been a while. So how are you seeing that negotiations going? And are we actually going to see a pipeline built?
Well, maybe to go to your second question first, are we actually going to see a pipeline built? Look, ultimately, we need more pipelines. We need more gas pipelines. We need more oil pipelines. We have extraordinary resources in Canada that the world wants. We need more pipelines to get those resources to market. To get those resources to market, that is the United States, and through the United States to global markets, or directly to global markets from Canadian export ports off one of our coasts. Now, I think that the reality is that you can throw a heck of a lot of money at a pipeline idea, and eventually somebody will come to the table and say, okay, under those conditions, I'm prepared to do it. And it seems to me that that's fundamentally what the MOU is about. It's about how much money can federal and provincial governments put on the table in an effort to attract investors. But I think there's something fundamentally wrong with that model. Why instead don't we have a model where we say, why don't we clear the regulatory deck? Why don't we take away the raft of burdens that exist in federal and provincial regulation that are preventing investors from saying, hey, I want to go to Canada first. So why don't we have a series of companies coming forward and competing and saying, hey, I want to build that pipeline and here's the deal I'll offer. Instead, what we have is governments putting more and more money on the table. And the only reason they need to do that is because they've created this unbelievably complicated regulatory framework, which is an enormous burden for any investor. And right now, what we have is infrastructure companies saying, where am I going to put my money? I'm probably going to put my money in a jurisdiction in the United States with a much more open process, with much less regulation, where I have clarity in terms of what my returns will be, and much less risk for my shareholders. And that is a circumstance which I think is deeply, deeply problematic for Canada. There's a way out of it. I'm not convinced the MOU is the right way out of it. As I say, it may eventually lead to a pipeline, but at what cost?
Okay, so Tim, we're going to pick up on that on the other side when we go to commercial break because I want to hear your ideas. More on Canadian Innovators. We'll be right back. Welcome back. My guest today is president of High Park Group, Timothy Egan. Tim, before we went to break, you were about to tell us what your idea is on how to get pipelines and prosperity in the energy field to Canada. So please continue on.
Well, I think the elephant in the room, if you will, is the fact that there is a massive carbon tax still on the table. And under the MOU as drafted, that carbon tax is it's called the industrial carbon tax. So consumers don't see it in the same way as they did the consumer carbon tax, but it remains there as an enormous cost to the end user because there is a price put on carbon that has to be passed through. And so we're all going to see it in the cost of goods and services that we pay for. Under the MOU, that carbon tax is going up. Now, both the federal government and the Alberta government are trying to take a victory lap on the fact that it's not going up by as much as it might otherwise have. But that's a Pyrrhic victory if there ever was one. It's still going up, and I question whether it needs to be there in the first place. And what you would need to do, I believe, to set the conditions for serious investment in infrastructure to get our goods to market is to take that carbon tax away, is to take a host of other regulatory burdens away, pieces of legislation that are inhibiting investors from coming to Canada. And then you would see a remarkable competitive rush, I believe, of people coming to Canada and saying, hey, I want to invest there.
Yeah, interesting thoughts. I agree with you. We are so blessed in our resource markets, but we need to do what we can to grow the economy through them. Tim, on just about every economic metrics, Canada is doing poorly compared to other leading nations. Yet the federal government seems to be spinning that our economy is on great shape. And we just heard over the weekend that Canada is formally in a recession. Talk to us about the economy and how we're doing.
Well, I mean, look, I'm not an expert on economic analysis. All I know is from my own work in the resource sector that we are not investing in the way we should in the resource sector. The Prime Minister, in his remarks in New York that you cited earlier, noted how many deals are being done in respect to opportunities for investment in different companies in different resource sectors. He talked about our work on small modular reactors. He talked about his own electricity agenda and the idea to double the size of Canada's electric grid. All of those things he talked about are things that turn on some kind of government investment, some kind of government play in the economy. And I don't doubt that the Prime Minister is committed to national economic growth, but I think the whole approach being taken is one that is top down, that is about government intervention, that is about using public dollars to try to drive private investment instead of taking aside the public intervention and allowing the market to pursue the opportunities that are there. And that's what I think we need to do. And I think because we're not doing that, our economy is not growing at the rate it should. Jocelyn, it's these things are anecdotal, but they're not to be ignored. How many young people do you know who are really excited about the prospect of staying in Canada? How many young people do you know who are looking positively at the future and the opportunity to buy homes and build businesses? It is astounding to me the number of young people I talk to who are looking to leave our country, who are looking negatively at the economic prospects. And that's a terrible thing when you look at the resource wealth we have and the opportunity we should be affording people.
Yeah, absolutely. The brain drain of our young entrepreneurs is huge and continues, and we haven't done anything to address that situation. We just got about 30 seconds. Tim, if give your best advice to the Prime Minister, should he be listening?
I'd say stop assuming that the government can run the economy. Find ways to move government out of the way of private business, rather than saying, "Look, here's the way I want to go." I think the prime minister has a particular fixation on an environmental agenda. I don't think that's changed from his predecessor, and I think that needs to change. And that's part of that government interventionist approach he's taking that we need to change in our country.
Well, Tim, we're out of time. We're going to have to get you back and hear more thoughts on the economy next time.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks to my guest, Timothy Egan from the High Park Group. I'm Jocelyn Bamford. Thank you for watching Canadian Innovators. If you're an innovator, tell us your story. Write to us at info@thenewsforum.ca, and we'll see you next time.